I once heard someone say, once a week, people gather for about an hour in a building and lie to each other. This critique was on the structure of modern religious life. Across faiths and traditions, what people believe in their hearts sometimes doesn't match the words on the page of the prayer book or the hymnal. I think this is a simplistic attack on what really happens in faith communities. But I also think that for many, it points to a tiny bit of truth. It was also true in the early part of the 20th century, when an Orthodox rabbi named Mordecai Kaplan was rethinking about what Judaism could be. Born in 1881 in modern Lithuania, at the age of 9, he moved to New York City to be with his father, a rabbi who had moved there in the service of another rabbi in the city. There he was introduced to more freedom, a growing world of cutting-edge science, and early radical thinkers in philosophy, education, and religion. Ordained as an Orthodox rabbi, Kaplan later joined the conservative movement, a traditional movement that thought modernity had a place in tradition, and taught for 50 years at their main seminary in New York. During that time, his changing ideas about God, Torah, and Jewish peoplehood evolved into a philosophy of Judaism that attracted many modern Jews. While Orthodox and conservative Judaism held the past as a guiding principle, and Reformed Judaism rejected much of the past in its own ways of worship and practice, Kaplan looked to the past, but wanted to reconstruct it in the present. His famous quote was, "The past has a vote, but not a veto." Through the 20th century, his ideas of Reconstructionist Judaism attracted more and more adherents, even though it was not yet a separate movement or denomination of Judaism. But in the 1960s, however, Reconstructionism finally became its own movement and established a seminary to ordain rabbis. A quick note, Congregation Beth-El Zedeck, who employs me, was a charter member of the organization that became the current movement, and they hired Rabbis Dennis and Sandy Sasso, students of the second graduating class of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. The first class had only one student. Sandy, being ordained, was the first woman rabbi in the movement and the second or third, depending on how you're counting, woman rabbi in modern history. Since the time of Kaplan, Reconstructionism has grown and changed, constantly seeking to blend Jewish tradition and practice with the history of understanding of what it means to be the Jewish people. Kaplan's daughter became the first bat mitzvah in 1922, an event that was celebrated just a few weeks ago at the synagogue in New York City, SAJ, formerly the Society for the Advancement of Judaism, that Kaplan started. Reconstructionists led ways of welcoming of differences to be it the variety of expressions of thought in understanding God, prayer language, and welcoming the most marginalized people, including people of color and members of the LGBT community, not only as members, but as leaders, both lay and clergy. The Reconstructionist movement has jumped in the water before other movements in many of these social issues. Kaplan himself saw Judaism as confronting the wisdom of the age we are in, and not simply looking backwards. We can move forward in our understanding of what it means to live a just-filled life, which is what the Torah actually calls us to do. A Reconstructionist Jew has strong commitment to both tradition and to the search for contemporary meaning. Rituals are still practiced, but are not done so because we're told to, but because they inherently have meaning for us. Reconstructionism encourages all Jews to enhance their own lives by reclaiming our shared heritage and becoming active participants in building of the Jewish future. Reconstructionists approach Judaism and life with deep reverence for the past and passion related to the present in a rapidly changing world. Reconstructionist communities share and create new ways of being Jewish to connect us to the divine and ensure our lives are filled with purpose. We view Judaism as an evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people in an ongoing relationship with God. Our shared culture, rituals, traditions, and practice reflect over 3,000 years of evolution, and we continue to share and shape it today. We break down the walls that divide us, demonstrating what it means to be Jewish, standing up for justice and creating a better world for all. We experience and discover God through daily acts of ritual, creative expression, and humanity, which leads us to individual spiritual fulfillment. We have originated, as I said, many of the core innovations in American Judaism and lead efforts in the community even more forward-thinking, inclusive, and relevant. We are committed to democratic practice and life in Jewish life and believe that people hold the right and the obligation to reconstruct Judaism in order for it to remain relevant in our lives. Reconstructionism sees Judaism as ever evolving. While our dispersion throughout the world has resulted in some cultural differences, by and large, we are united by a common religious civilization and must work toward transcending differences that divide us. Our common history is a source of our covenant and what motivates us and commands us to live life Jewishly. In short, Reconstructionist Judaism is a movement that asks us to take a deep understanding of where Judaism came from, learning the biblical past and the millennia of commentary, while making sure that we bring our commentary and our voices to the challenge and to challenge those ideas of the past that do not fit current life experiences, elevating those that do, reconstructing ways to express our ideas. Deeper exploration of Jewish practice and prayer has helped create Jewish people that write new prayer language from the framework of ancient texts, redefine ritual, imbibing it with new meaning, and exploring long-held beliefs from a new angle. The goal is to be intellectually honest in our approach to the divine. There are three fundamental ideas when it comes to religion that Reconstructionists use as a foundation for the movement: belonging, behaving, and believing. Belonging, the idea of Jewish peoplehood, is central. Jews share binding ties that cut across different practices, beliefs, and national boundaries, binding us together through a common history and a shared destiny. Behaving, Judaism as a revolving religious civilization, for it to remain living, we must reach out and take hold of Jewish practice, reshape it, and make it new for every generation. One way is through the changing Passover Seder over time. Acknowledging the story of the Seder is something that has been used as a metaphor for many cultures over time. And so we acknowledge what it says to other people. And finally, believing. Reconstructionists hold diverse ideas about God, but we share an emphasis on godliness. Those hopes, beliefs, and values within us that impel us to work for a better world, that give us strength and solace in times of need, that challenge us to grow and to deepen our joy in moments of celebration. Recognition that all descriptions of God are metaphor. Our prayer books offer images of God that go far beyond the classic king of the universe. God is not seen as a supernatural being that acts on the world with great authority in performing miracles, but the power that animates the universe and turns humanity into acts of justice and righteousness. One rabbi said, God is like the electricity in the walls. We don't see it, it's always there, but when we engage it, we see its power. These three guideposts help us develop our communal and personal relationship with each other in the greater community. There are a couple things that are pretty interesting that Kaplan lent Reconstructionist Judaism that are troublesome to some. Kaplan taught to reject the concept of the chosen people. It is still central to Reconstructionist thought today. He felt the term was misunderstood and too often taken as a sign of superiority, when instead it was conceived as an expression of Jewish obligation to God and humanity. So too, Kaplan rejected the concept of a personal Messiah. That is, that God will send a Messiah in the form of a human being. Both of these were radical to the prevailing thought of the day in Judaism, even as Judaism was evolving in other movements. But still, it's what most people think of when trying to describe the Jewish people. References to the Messiah and to chosenness are so ingrained in Western thought that we find them in pop culture references, jokes, and sometimes even serious discussions about Judaism. Rejection of these two ideas was a liberating moment for many, leading to a new way to explore Judaism and their role in it. The shift in thought is part of the ongoing evolution I spoke of earlier. One way to summarize how Reconstructionists have not only embraced the idea of the evolution of Judaism, but taught others to read and taught others to do this, is to read the foreword of Kaplan's own Passover Haggadah, the prayer book we use for the Seder on Passover. It was written in 1941 by Kaplan and two of his students, Ira Eisenstein, who was the first president of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, and Eugene Cohn. In it, they explored the most central ritual of Jewish practice, the Passover Seder. Written during the Nazi occupation of Europe, they acknowledged the age-old story of struggle between freedom and oppression, writing, "In all previous generations, Jews derived their faith in the ultimate victory from their tradition and their religious heritage, particularly from the epic of the Exodus. For centuries, it was the Pesach Haggadah that Jews turned to whenever they suffered oppression and injustice. Exodus of the Israelites from ancient Egypt was a constant assurance that they too would be delivered from tyranny. They believed that just as God had liberated Israel from Pharaoh by a strong hand and outstretched arms, so would God redeem Israel from the tragedy of Galut, of exile. Times have changed. We live in a new world. We are confronted with new conditions. But the problem is still the same. The problem is how, in the face of setbacks and despite a demagogic appeals to false prophets, to keep alive in men and people the love of freedom and their faith in it. The language and concepts of ancient right need to be revised so that we can go straight to the minds and hearts of men and women today. This foreword, written to explain the need for a new Haggadah, also explains the need for a new Judaism. With the rise of understanding of science, the clear view that the equations of the ancient text, do good and you will be rewarded, do bad and you will be punished, were not seen as being fulfilled. And the growing involvement of Jews in everyday secular life, Judaism had to change to match those hearts and minds of men and women of that day and today. Not by rejecting the entirety of the past and embracing the look of the dominant culture as some did. Not by circling the wagons and chipping away at the edges as others did. Judaism had to evolve in a way that, as the current motto of the movement says, to be deeply rooted and boldly relevant. Reconstructionist Judaism is a modern American form of Judaism. It calls us to live comfortably in two civilizations, the Jewish community, and in our case, our Western democratic society. I'm proud to count myself as a Reconstructionist Jew, one who sees the divine both on the pages of an ancient text and in the interactions with the greater world around me. Thank you for helping me to do it here with you today.